Okay, so I want to tell you about my love of Indianapolis, and I want to start from the very, very beginning. Indianapolis is my first love, and by that I mean it's the love that I had as an early adult that I then cheated on. Because I was 20-something and I was confused and lost and didn't know what exactly to do, and I needed to find myself before I could really fulfill that relationship with Indianapolis. So let me start from the beginning as to how I fell in love with Indianapolis and how I returned to Indianapolis and fell in love with it all over again. When I was a sophomore in college, one of my favorite things to do was get together with my college roommates and watch Felicity and Sex and the City on television. I was obsessed with those shows. I actually even considered, and I don't have curly hair, and I am not 5'2" in pixie, I even considered a really short haircut because it was just so cool. And the people on those shows were just so cool to me. So I dreamt about moving to New York City after I graduated from college. It was all I wanted to do from the time I was a sophomore until the time I was a senior. I was an art history major. It was perfect. I was going to work at the Met. I was going to find a really artsy, intelligent boyfriend who wore cool glasses. And I was going to find a glamorous, hip lifestyle in New York, just like the girls on the television shows that I watched. The problem was that September of my senior year was September of 2001. And all of a sudden I grew up and realized that I am way too scared and I am way too unexperienced to move to New York City. So I changed my horizons, I changed what I wanted to do, and decided to play it really safe, because I'm kind of the person that likes to play it really safe, to be perfectly honest. And so I decided to go to grad school for arts administration. And I decided to move to Indianapolis after that to do an entry-level job at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. I was actually hired as the assistant to the director of marketing. I loved Indianapolis. I loved it from the very beginning. I was here for 3.5 years. I had an amazing circle of friends. I was very involved with Indy Hub from the very beginning. I volunteered at various organizations around the city. I felt like I was a part of the city in a way that I'd never felt like a part of anything before. But with that first relationship as an adult, you always start to have those questions that begin to percolate and bubble up. Is this all there is? Is this the happiness that I've been searching for? Is there something better out there? And I started to daydream a little bit as I was starting to have that angst of being in a relationship and wondering where it was going to go next. So the New York City fantasy started to creep up again. And on a whim, I applied for a job as the marketing manager at the Guggenheim Museum. And 3 days later, I got called and told, why don't you fly out here for an interview? I flew out there for an interview, and 2 weeks later, I was offered the job. 4 weeks later, I was in New York City. I didn't even have time. I just broke up with Indianapolis and said, okay. I just left. I packed up my bags. I didn't really have that closure conversation. I didn't really have that moment where we hugged and said goodbye. I just kind of got out of here. And it was great. And it was the adventure that I had been looking for. It was the risk that I had been looking for, and the change that I had been looking for. And New York City was one of those places that was hip and edgy. And I kept giving to the city, and I kept really, really enjoying the city. But it was like one of those boyfriends that's like hip and edgy, and you do all these things with him, but you can't imagine ever marrying him. You can't imagine ever staying there and having a life there and being 70 with the city of New York City. It just didn't seem right to me to grow old with New York City. It just didn't feel right. So after I was there for a year, it's like Indianapolis, my soulmate, sensed something was wrong, sensed something that I was starting to question my relationship with New York City. And Indianapolis called, and specifically the IMA called, and said, we have a job if you're interested. You'd basically be running the marketing department and various other things. It's the director of public affairs position. If you're interested in coming back to Indianapolis, we'd like to have you back at the IMA. We'd like to bring you back to the IMA. And I did the same thing to New York that I did to Indianapolis, but I felt a lot less guilty about it. I left New York City in a rush, almost a year to the day that I moved to New York City. And it's the best decision that I've ever made. It was the bravest decision I ever made. And in making that decision, the thing that I contemplated the most was, In New York, I kept giving to the city, and I never really saw an impact. I never really saw what the fruits of my labor were. But in Indianapolis, when I gave to the city, it gave back. And I got to see the efforts, and I got to see the impact that I had. And I got to see Indianapolis change just by the little things that I did in Indianapolis. And I got to see the impact that my friends had by the things that they did in Indianapolis. And I got to see Indianapolis grow. And those were things that I wanted in a relationship. Those were the things that I wanted from a city that I lived in. So here I am in Indianapolis. I know that it loves me as much as I love it, because within a month of moving back, I met Joe Ball, my husband. And we're adding one more to the population of Indianapolis in March. And I know that it's the right decision for me. I know that it's the right decision for my family. And I see so much potential for this city, and I cannot wait to participate in it in the future. Any questions? Since Jeremiah started that, I wasn't.
This is a good night, by the way, right? All the regulars, this is a good night. I have a question.
Yeah.
So we're talking about like dating a city.
Yeah.
When you left
And cheating on a city.
You left Manhattan.
Uh-huh.
Which one would you call like the walk of shame?
Oh, leaving Manhattan was a walk of shame, for sure. Leaving Indianapolis, actually, I think most people in their mid-20s who have lived in Indiana for 25 years start to have that, oh God, am I going to leave the state? Am I going to leave Indiana? I feel like I need an adventure. And I was one of those people that felt like she needed an adventure. And it's like a year abroad living in New York. I had my year abroad. I never got that in college. My parents just didn't go for it. So I had it in New York City on my own terms, and I learned so much about myself in that year, but at the same time, I knew it just wasn't the right fit. It just didn't feel comfortable to me. And going back to the Felicity and Sex and the City reference that I made earlier, I've always been, for people who have watched the shows, you'll get it. I've always been the person that really preferred Aiden to Big. and Ben, and Noel to Ben. I like the safe, comfortable, you can see a future with that person that's more than just the next day. It's a long-term thing. And so that's why I came back.
Indianapolis is
Yes, exactly.